Well, hey there, everybody. This is Float On, the podcast that gives you guidance and insight in seeing more beauty along the river ride that is life. You can't go back. You can only learn and move forward. I'm your host and producer, Dalia Jean, and I'm super excited you're here with me to learn together as we inevitably float on. I hope today is treating you kindly and that you're doing well. This week's episode includes Amanda Ferrat, who is the founder of Value Yourself Counseling. She has an extensive history of education and experience in the mental health and wellness field and social services. She uses her education, experience, skills, and passion to help other women heal from loss and grief, and to go from being emotionally and mentally reactive and out of control to taking back the driver's seat in their lives. As a certified emotional wellness counselor, EFT practitioner, and speaker, she believes all women have had to navigate difficult things and boundaries in their lives and deserve to be healed and empowered to be all that they are meant to be. Amanda was such a pleasure to speak with, and honestly, I feel like I made a new friend. So much goodness came out of our conversation, and I'm excited to share it all with you. So let's jump right into it. Amanda, I'm so happy you're here.
Yes, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. It's a sunny day here in Portland, Oregon, so I can't complain.
Yes, Portland. Gotta love it. So do me a favor, Amanda, and tell us a little bit about some of your important moments as someone who really strives to learn from life and what you feel led you to that point.
Well, I am a Montana ranch kid. Actually, we lived in town, but my grandparents were both ranchers on both sides of my family because my parents grew up together. And
That's
so
cool.
you learn a lot being a Montana kid that has access to ranch life. You learn about the circle of life. You learn where things end up on your plate, where they came from.
Wow.
But my grandpa loved to learn. He loved Lewis and Clark and history and various things. And, you know, his office was fairly off limits, but he had these shelves above his desk of all these old books, and he would pull them out from time to time and share them. And one of the things we actually like to do was pull out his big old dictionary and flip to a random page and run our finger over and then stop randomly. And like whatever word we landed on, that was the word that we learned of the day, and kind of would figure out ways to use it creatively in sentences.
So fun. He did that with you guys?
Yeah. So, and he also loved comic books as well, right? So it was the full range from comic books to like very history heavy textbooks.
That's pretty neat though.
Yeah, I loved it. And so that's where my love of learning kind of started. And my other grandparents, my mom's parents, had these shelves full of encyclopedias. So like there were always books present.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had this love of learning, and then learning from life too, right? Like,
yeah.
Again, growing up kind of a feral child in Montana, you learn all these life lessons. And
that term, I don't know why it cracks me up. I'm a cat lady, so.
Well, we were safe to run around. You know, our neighbors kept an eye on us. We literally, I mean, we weren't always safe, right? Like back then you could very easily slip a car into neutral. Right. We lived on the main street in town, and there were more times than I'm sure they'd care to count that, you know, our car would be rolled into the street because us kids would be pretending to drive, you know, things like that. Funny. But my biggest learning curve has been around grief and loss in my life. And that started for me at age 7 when a friend of mine died. He was bucked off a horse and didn't survive.
Oh my gosh. Wait, was this a friend like your age?
Yes, he was my age.
Oh my gosh, Amanda.
I knew, you know, of course my family wanted to protect me. And I said, no, we go to funerals. That's what you do. When you love someone and care about someone, you show respect by going to their funeral.
Oh my gosh, and I'm like tearing up right now. Just imagining like you're 7 and you lose a friend that way.
Well, and I loved horses.
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, there's so many levels to that because you were an outdoor kid and you loved, it was such a huge part of your life. And then like, bam, smacks you right in the face, you know?
Right. And I'm still not afraid of horses. I will walk right up to horses, other livestock, not afraid at all. But I knew in that moment, like, I also didn't need to be afraid of death. I want to go to the funeral. It's not going to traumatize me. And I still can see my mom and I walking in, and I see the small casket up at the front of the church covered in flowers. And that's all I kind of visually remember. But, you know, I learned about that life and death and the cycles all through my life, right? Again, I couldn't get attached to the baby calves when we'd have to bottle feed them or anything like that, because one day they were going to end up on somebody's plate, you know, like learning about those things. But then I was actually the first person to go straight through high school and into college. My mom started college and then took a break and married my dad and kind of took her life another direction, then went back to school once us kids were older. But I was the first one in my family to go straight through high school and was graduated with high honors, was on the National Honor Society, had been a scholar and a learner, and, loved to be in all the things academic, and went on to college. And college got a little trickier, right? Because I was thinking I wanted to be a veterinarian, and then realized that cycle of life stuff was a little too much to deal with all the time. I worked in a vet hospital my entire senior year of high school.
Oh, wow.
And got to see how hard it was to do all the things. And so once I realized how competitive it was, right, and that there were real ranch kids who had literally been dealing with it way more than I had, I was like, yeah, I'm going to let you guys have that. I'm going to find something else. And eventually landed in family sciences because I realized people. I had a knack for working with people and helping people, and I really was called to be of service to folks. And so got my college degree. It was kind of on that 5-year plan, and went through a few majors. But my family really pushed for me to continue to be a learner. I wanted to take a break a couple times, and they were like, no, just do it. Just do it. Aww. And my learning journey continued because all of our social service jobs in Montana got cut after I graduated.
Oh, wow.
So everyone I had graduated with, we were fighting for jobs. Agencies were literally being dissolved into other agencies.
Why
and so
was
I said,
that? Was there some bigger reason that was happening?
Montana's fairly conservative, and so social services often end up on the chopping block.
Gotcha.
So this would have been early 2000s. And so I was like, well, what can I do where my education can still be honored, but like I can move and have housing? And so I nannied.
Ooh,
and I got,
nice.
Yeah. And I got placed with an amazing family in Princeton, New Jersey. And this was less than a year after 9/11. And Princeton, New Jersey is only about an hour outside of New York City.
Yeah.
So my family was terrified to have me move away with all of that. And I was like, no, I'm ready to go. Like, I can't keep working for pennies in Montana. Like, I need to get out and have an adventure. I'm young. And one of the really cool things was the family I worked for honored that I was educated and that I had a college degree. And the nanny, one of the nannies before me was an advocate for nannies to get continuing education. And so she advocated for us to have it kind of worked into our contracts that there would be something. So they actually paid for me to go to the National Association for the Education of Young Children conference every year.
Neat.
Right. And so I got to continue learning. And so that I've always had this love of continuing to learn, continuing to better myself. And that continued as I nannied. And then I finally transitioned from nannying back into kind of the social services field. In that world, you constantly have to keep learning and growing because there's always new modalities and new things. So I was always in a field of work where continual learning was always encouraged and part of the expectation.
Yeah.
And so that fit for me because I've always kind of been that lifelong learner.
Yeah.
But then my grief journey and learning there really came back into play kind of 2014 on. July of 2014, right around my birthday, my grandma was sick and dying of lung cancer, and she'd never been a smoker. It came on really quick.
Wow.
I'd last seen her in May and she was fine. And then that July, I spent my birthday holding her hand as she was starting to fade. And she was gone 2 days later on the 17th. And so, came back to Portland, had a job that wasn't very compassionate. We were supposed to take care of everybody else, but they weren't very good about having us truly take care of ourselves, even though they preached self-care, but they micromanaged our self-care, which takes the self out of self-care and doesn't really work.
Yeah.
So I lost that job, which was a blessing in disguise.
Right.
But then, monetarily, that kind of put me in a tough spot, and I lost a friend. And so I wasn't able to go home for his funeral. And so it became this journey of like, all right, what is life trying to teach me? Like, I lost a job. I've lost, my person in my family. I've lost a good friend.
Yeah.
What do I need to figure out? And what is my next step? And so finally my unemployment kicked in, and I was like, I'm coming home. I need to come home.
Yeah.
I need some time around my family.
Yeah.
And my dad had been battling cancer for quite a while, but he was doing pretty good at this point. And I remember sitting at the dining room table with him, and I don't remember how we got on this subject, but I was talking about grad school, that I was thinking about grad school. And I was like, oh, someday. And he's like, why someday? Why not now? And so I got on to Portland State University's website for their School of Social Work and looked when they were having their next orientation and when their deadline was. And so I was home and it was November. Well, they had a student orientation coming up in December.
Ooh.
I was like, well, I guess I have to drive back to Portland for this because I just signed up. And the application was due, I want to say end of January, February, somewhere in there, right? So literally came home, devoted every single day to, like, I do my minimum requirements, right, to keep getting my unemployment for looking for a job. But otherwise, every hour was devoted to filling out my grad school application, submitted that. And then I think that April, I found out. And by then I had gotten another job, and they knew in that job interview that I had applied for grad school, and that was a possibility. So I got into grad school. So started fall of 2015. Yeah, it was super exciting. I was like, yes, I get to continue learning. So started grad school while having this job, and they decided they weren't as accommodating as they'd promised they would be. And so that wasn't working out anymore. So left that job and focused solely on school.
But that's good though, because you kind of knew your direction and you were like, no, I need to do this right now.
Right.
You know, like this is, and I'm going through that right now. I've put off my hiring my education. I'm a teacher, and I've put it off for years because I was in a district where my job security was basically on the chopping block every year. And I finally left there. I finally had enough stress, and it was just draining on me for so many years that I changed districts. And now I feel like I'm in a better place. It's a growing district. I have a little bit of security, enough that I felt like I could pursue and so then COVID hit, and I'm like, wait, I'm home all the time. It's time to do this. And so now I'm in the midst of doing my master's degree too. And it's funny how life does that for you. Like when you want something, you know, it's almost like, you know, some people talk about manifestation. And I just feel like if you're open to the path and seeing
that receptivity,
then it's there, and it will, if you're aware of it and you're willing to see like, oh wait, maybe this is my chance right now, you know? Yeah. It's neat that you did that. You stuck with it.
Well, I stuck with it till life decided it had another plan.
Uh-oh.
And so summer of 2016, so I loved my first year in grad school. I learned so much. In fact, I kind of became this like almost weaponized, right? Because I had all this social justice knowledge suddenly and all these things. And like my mind was being blown wide open, and everybody's like, whoa, you're really intense. And I'm like, I just want to share all this knowledge that I have.
Right.
And everybody's like, you need to calm down a little bit. I'm like, no, it's so exciting. I have this new world view.
Oh, it's great though.
And which for my conservative, you know, Montana family and friends, they were kind of like,
oh gosh, yeah.
Oh, Portland finally got to her. She's getting a little out there. But summer of 2016, my dad's cancer, it became apparent again on my birthday that his cancer was going to win. But we had a little bit of time this time. So I was able to let PSU know that I needed to take the fall off.
Yeah.
And I came home, and I got to spend the last 2.5 weeks of his life with him.
Wow.
Helping my mom with the caregiving. And, you know, that was another opportunity to learn, right? It was learning about how to be in those difficult moments, learning how to be with someone through awful, horrible physical pain, and like trying to figure out emotionally, you know, coming to terms with the fact that they're dying. And
it's a lot.
It is a lot.
It's
and
a
then,
lot to deal
you know,
with.
all the family roles, right? Like what role do we each play, and making sure we don't kill each other and stress each other out. And everybody grieves differently too, right? So learning.
Right.
And
so when it's over, it's a very strange realization how much of a cloud you were in at that point.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? It's very intense.
Well, and my cloud stuck because I came home in time to vote in the 2016 election. And that, of course, did not go the way I had hoped. And even though I wasn't in school, it was a major blow to most of us in the program because, again, we all we voted a different way than how things went. And we could see the impact it was going to have. And so we literally, like, there were meetings held like where we could just come and share as students. And so I was up on campus, even though I wasn't enrolled in that fall term. I went back and was holding space with my peers who were grieving, right? This turnout from the election. So I went from, you know, and I didn't really get to fully grieve my dad. 4 days after he passed, I was in my best friend's wedding, and like there was all these things to do, right? So I just kept doing the things and doing the things. So January comes, winter term starts, I'm back in school. So this is January 2017. February 2017, my grandpa is dying. So it's, hey, Mandy, you got to come home again. So go home.
It's like one year after another almost.
Oh yeah. And so go home, spend time with my grandpa as he passes. In fact, I read him stuff about Lewis and Clark, right? Again, that lifelong learning. I read to him in his last days.
And you were very close with your grandparents, it seems. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. My grandparents helped raise me just as much as my parents.
Same. My grandparents were, I think, even more of an influence on me, and they passed away 2 days apart
from separate causes. It was so surreal. And I can totally relate to this one after another experience, and just trying to navigate that as a young person. These people who you view as important pillars of who you are, you know?
Yeah. So it was midterms. So trying to finish and juggle midterms and get home and deal with that and then come back and finish out the term. And spring term went okay. Summer comes. I'd had some more losses in there of kind of other distant family members or people I knew, but nothing major. And then over the summer, my cat who I'd had for a decade, she'd moved with me from Philly to Montana to Portland, was diagnosed with kidney disease.
No, that's
and it was
the worst.
And it was
I
pretty
had
obvious.
one like that too. We have so much in common.
And she was failing fast. We got about 2 months with her, and it was pretty evident she'd quit eating. And so put her down on a Saturday and started the fall term on a Monday.
Oh my gosh, Amanda.
Right? And so
you've gone through this cycle of like always having something immediately after a loss.
Yes. So then my dad's cousin passed away, and my grandma was having trouble, and she finally fell, and it was the last kind of straw, and she was passing. So it was pack up finals, do what I can before I leave, pack up the rest of my finals. I was literally finishing my finals at her bedside, her last week of her life, you know, stayed through her passing and through that Christmas break, and then came home to Portland and went right back to school in January. And finally it caught up and life imploded.
Yeah.
That's where I had to learn to stop and take care of myself, and that life had different lessons for me and a different path for me. And I was faced with a really big decision. Do I keep pushing or do I take a step back? And so I took a step back. Taking that step back made me realize I didn't want to finish my master's. It wasn't a path I wanted to be on anymore. The people that had advocated and were so excited about me being on that path were now no longer alive. So what did it matter anyhow, right? And so kind of slipped into some darkness. Things got darker and worse before they got better. But then I realized, you know, I need to fix this. I have always been somebody that's overcome. And it became a lot of learning about family. I learned from other relatives that there had probably been some intergenerational trauma and abuse handed down, and that things that my grandparents and my dad had maybe done had been learned by other relatives. And so started to like unpack some of that and relate it to like, oh, I've probably had anxiety and mental health my whole life, but we never talked about it. So now what can I do to break that chain and break that you know, train. And so started going, and I'd gone to therapy a couple different times in my life, but found a new therapist and was like, hey, like, I really want to dig in. Like, it's time to do some real work. And being somebody that's in the world of social work that was learning to be a therapist, I would create these relationships with my therapist where we'd almost become buddies. And I said that with this new therapist. I said, we got to have boundaries because I'm really, and it's not a manipulation. Like, I don't do it on purpose, but I'm smart. Like, I know what I know because I was going to be you. So I need somebody that's going to like hold my feet to the fire. And so I found a great therapist. And I also did my reading up and educating myself on, because not only my mental health and emotional health were struggling, I had some stuff going on physically. So I did some reading and learning about the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, and realized I qualified according to the ADA as disabled.
Oh, wow.
And so for my 40th birthday, I got myself a puppy and decided to train him as a service dog. Because you can train your own service dogs.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yes.
That's interesting.
And so I did that because I was agoraphobic at the time. And so it was going to force me to get out of the house.
Oh, wow.
And start to reintegrate myself into society, because you can't hide in the house with a puppy. That you're trying to train as a service animal.
But you found a way to sort of give yourself a reason to overcome, you know? You're like, you know, I need this thing that's going to help me overcome this other thing.
Right. And it kind of backfired because people aren't very good with service animals. People don't follow they don't know, so they don't always follow. But people are horrible. They distract your dog. They talk to it. They look at the puppy.
Pet it.
Right. So I was like, this is not working. But I stuck it through, and we found a good trainer, and I was getting some help, and we were working on things. And then lo and behold, he's disabled too.
Shut up. up.
Yeah. I noticed a change in his gait and started getting him assessed. And sure enough, his femurs are turned in and he has kneecaps that slip out of place unexpectedly.
Oh my gosh, poor buddy. How do you treat that?
Surgery.
Oh, wow.
But he's not a candidate right now for surgery because he's still so young that he would never follow surgery protocol. So he actually has adapted. He knows how to get his kneecap back into place.
No way. Wow.
He's resilient. And so ethically, I couldn't work him as a service dog anymore.
Yeah.
So honestly, he probably would have failed. He's an Akita, and Akitas are stubborn.
Those are neat dogs, though.
Yes.
They're cool.
But he's now an emotional support animal, and he still does some of his work. Like, he emotionally, empathetically is very in tune.
Yeah.
In fact, if I'm on Zoom with somebody and he feels their emotions, like, he'll come in and check in on my sessions.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
What a guy. What's his name?
His name is Ludo, Ludo.
Oh, I love that.
It's from the movie Labyrinth that came out in the 80s with David Bowie.
Yes, I know what you're talking about.
So he had surgery in October of this last year, and my mom was here. It was totally random. It was an emergency surgery that he had to have. So it kind of ruined my mom and I's plans to actually go to the coast, like you and I were talking about earlier, right? The beautiful Oregon coast.
Yes.
But I also had a horrible flare up. I have chronic and mental illnesses, and my chronic illnesses were flaring.
Oh, wow.
So he's literally laying there on his bed, right? Still kind of doped up, cone of shame on and all. And he sees and can tell that I'm not okay. And I was starting to cry, and I was in massive pain. And he got up, went and alerted my mom like he was trained to do, and then came and started he nudges my thigh and then lays so I can, because he's got the best like scruffy fur on his shoulders.
Yeah, they're like big teddy bears.
Yeah. And so I look over at my mom, and her jaw is just sitting on her chest, and she's like, what? I said, yeah, you can't untrain certain parts of a service animal.
Yeah.
And I said, yeah, even though he's in pain and he just had surgery and I need to be taking care of him. She's like, I just can't believe how empathic and empathetic he is. I said, oh yeah, he's this total, he's a loyal protector and like a big bad guard dog and a super sweet teddy bear.
That's great. How old is he now?
His birthday is tomorrow, March 10th, and he's turning 3.
Oh, that's so fun. He's birthday buddies with my youngest cat. She's turning 1 on Friday. Carmela.
Yeah.
So exciting. That's so amazing, though, that you got him and he's in your life. It's sort of an interesting thing, though, like how his path, I feel like your life, you had these intended paths and you're like, wait, life has another plan for me. And your dog sort of lived that same parallel. It's interesting.
And it's all been learning, right? Like I had to learn about training him, and then I had to learn about taking care of him now with this new, I don't even want to try to say the name of what they call it for his kneecaps. It's this big, long, complicated thing. And, but we've adapted.
Yeah. Together.
Yes.
I love it.
So my healing journey continued. I had to pivot and swerve because I didn't have him anymore. So it was like, okay, so how do I keep going into society? Like, but do it by myself and take care of myself. And life kept handing me losses. Summer of 2019, a friend of mine that I'd known kind of vaguely in high school, but got to know him better in college. And he actually became my best friend's brother-in-law. He died by suicide in summer of 2019. And so I went home as soon as I could and was there to help them do all they could as a family, and was helping them cope and sort through things, and was there holding space for everybody and all the emotions, and was home for kind of 2 different chunks of 3 weeks. So about 6 weeks total. And I came back to Portland after all of that. And I was like, all right, life is telling me something. I've been on this learning and healing journey. I've done all these things for me, and I just paid it forward. And I paid it forward, and it was very beautiful. How do I turn this into something? What does this mean? And so I met with a friend of mine that was a business coach. I was like, where do I go? Like, I don't want to go back to grad school. So what can I technically call myself? And like, what do I need to do? And so at that point I could call myself a coach. And so I decided I was going to be an emotional wellness coach and work in grief and those things as well, and self-care, because I realized that when somebody isn't micromanaging your self-care, it really can be about yourself.
Yeah.
And you can make it what you need it to be. And that's the biggest key to unlocking healing is to really prioritize your self-care. And so that was started in end of 2019, beginning of 2020, and then COVID, right? Pandemic hit. And I was like, okay, well, cool. I get to keep learning. Like, I don't have to be in a hurry to make this business a thing. I can sit back. So it was taking everything, of course, moved to online. I signed up for every single like webinar and class and course. And like, I was taking anything and everything I could. Also doing more things to heal personally, did hypnotherapy, all these other things. And then summer of 2020, I learned of EFT tapping.
What is that? I've never heard of this. I saw it in your bio and I was like, I don't know. Or it was on your form or something. And I was like, oh, tell me about it.
So EFT stands for Emotional Freedom Techniques.
Okay.
And it's literally, it combines Eastern and Western practices. So the Eastern practice is that you tap on acupressure meridians on your hands, body, and face.
I've heard of that, yes.
Yeah, while integrating talk therapy. And the talk therapy is helping you kind of dig into your subconscious and work through emotions or memories, beliefs, trauma. And so I saw Jackie McDonald come on Jaya Rose's page live, and I jumped in right as they were about to start tapping. So it's kind of like Simon Says. So you just follow along as somebody leads you through. And so I start following along and the tears start flowing. And I feel all this stuff like start to unlock and get set free and released and all these things. And I was like, okay, what is this magic? I need this magic in my life. I need to not only learn it for myself, but I need to use it with future clients. Like this is the magic I need in my life.
Yeah.
So Jackie soon after announced that she was going to be training. She'd have a new round of basic training to become an EFT practitioner. I was like, I'm done. Like, take my money. Here I go.
That's awesome.
Sign me up.
Because you had an experience with it. That's how I am with, have you ever heard of EMDR?
Yes, I did EMDR briefly.
I did EMDR for probably a solid year with my counselor, getting through and healing from PTSD from my childhood and things. And it's the same thing where I feel like I wish I could just go train in that and help people because it's so amazing. And when you have something like that, do the healing that you've always wanted and never got, and then all of a sudden this simple thing happens and you're like, what? I'm telling you, I've had like so many friends come to me and tell me about parts of their life. Just a good friend last week, and I literally told her, I'm like, you have PTSD. I'm telling you right now, just by what you're telling me, because she's describing these moments where she has like overwhelming emotion and like physical symptoms, and she's actually saying the word triggering. And I'm like, you have PTSD. How do you not see this? Because some people, I think, just view it as like something that a soldier gets from a horrible experience overseas or something like that. Like, no, any trauma, anything at all that causes you emotional scarring that you bear with you in the future, that you experience as fresh emotions based on an external stimuli, is a trigger. And you have post-traumatic stress. Like that's what it is. So it's funny because it reminds me of that. I'm going to have to look into this EFT. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's a magical tool. So what it does is as soon as you start tapping, it calms the amygdala and the sympathetic nervous system as well as the limbic system. So your emotions are calmed, your fight or flight is calmed, your cortisol response, all of that calms down. So then you can go from kind of this like frantic, reactive fight or flight, state of being to this rest and repose state. And you can access your subconscious at a deeper level. And that's where you can move from one emotional state to another. You can heal old thought patterns or beliefs. You can heal trauma. And we also, the method I'm trained in, the McDonald manifestation method, it trains us in not only doing like the inner child and inner warrior work, but future work too. So how we talked earlier about that receptivity and that manifestation, it does the work of like, well, what do you want? Let's go back and heal all the old stuff and the stuff that you've got going on now, and let's build a future vision for yourself and get you ready to welcome all that in and
start clearing that path out.
Right. And so I love EFT for what it can do, and I love the method I'm trained in, and it's also really good. A lot of people hear about EMDR or hear about EFT and they get scared because it's like, you're going to dig into my trauma, you're going to dig into my memories, and then what are you going to do with me? And the beautiful thing about EFT tapping and that I'm trained in is we are trained how to keep those memories safe, how to put it away safely if we're running out of time in a session, how to keep you safe so that you don't leave a session.
With some raw trauma cut wide open.
We're trained to not re-trigger. We're trained to, if a memory comes up, kind of approach it in a way that keeps you safe so that you aren't re-traumatized and that memory can be honored and reworked as needed. And I love that because I come from a harm reduction umbrella and I don't ever want to do more harm in my work work with folks. So I absolutely love the McDonald manifestation method. And so I was like, okay, dive in, and I'm learning this new thing. And then I found a wellness counseling certification program with Cornell. And I was like, oh, I'll sign up for that too. Like, let's learn more things. Let's learn like all the things.
I'm always doing stuff, always, because I feel like it's so powerful when you learn things that you're interested in. That is the double whammy. If you're going to get education and be open to it, it's got to be something that you're passionate about. And I've said this too in past episodes, you know, that whole, the modality and the process of learning, just viewing it as a process that you need to first educate yourself on the act of learning and understanding that you have to be open and passionate about that subject matter. And what that can do for you is amazing. You know, it's world shifting. It really is.
Well, and then part of my motivation for going for the Cornell certificate was I had gotten halfway through a graduate program, but I left it in trauma, and some of it was learned in trauma, and trauma brain hides things. It tucks things away. It was tucking all these things away to keep me safe, but it was taking all the learning with it.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I need this certification to bring all those things back, to let my brain know that it can let those things come forward. Those things are okay to know.
Right.
Those things are okay to learn. Part of the process of taking that 4-class certification was to unlock everything I had learned in grad school, bring it back safely to my brain, and tell my brain it was okay to know those things, and then to learn more, right? And to refresh that. And it was an amazing learning curve. And I was like having all these things come back, and I'm like, oh, I know this stuff. Like, I have this. And my professor confirmed it. She's like, her feedback was constantly positive, and like, you're way ahead of a lot of your peers. And I was like, sorry, you telling me I could have saved myself some money?
Right? Yeah. I could have skipped some of this.
But I'm really glad I did it, because again, it reinforced that love of learning. It reinforced that I knew what I knew, and that those were those things I still needed to know, and now I know them. And that, combined with learning the EFT and being certified now as a basic EFT practitioner, it has unlocked my path.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I'm in the advanced practitioner training right now. It's slated to end in April, and I'm loving that we're learning all these fun things about memory work and inner child work. And
you sound excited. I can tell your energy is just coming right through. Like,
because not only do I get to do all my healing, right? Like, I'm learning how to fix and heal all these things and learn how to be the best version of me. I now get to help other women learn how to get rid of those blocks, those thought patterns, those beliefs, those traumas, and be the best versions of themselves.
It's so powerful. I mean, that is so fulfilling, powerful. You know, when you know that you're helping people. And one thing I thought was interesting that you mentioned, and I don't even know if you noticed this, but when you talked about finishing your certificate at Cornell, and you had said it's okay to let some of these things through, and that the trauma brain hides things. I think that it's important for my listeners to know that your trauma hides away anything else that you were experiencing during that time. It packs it away. It's the normal function of your brain to cope and get through, is to pack it away. And if you are experiencing trauma, or you have experienced trauma, and you feel like you've got loopholes in your emotional development, or in your passions or interests or paths in life, that you need to deal with that trauma, it's a time to safely unpack it, find some help. Someone like Amanda would help very much, and to really deal with that, because I think people like to go on thinking that they're strong enough and that they can move past it and they can make their own closure. And, you know, there's that whole like, oh, find peace. Yes, that process is there, but there's more to it than just saying, oh, I found my peace with it. No. You've got to unpack and deal. You know? Right.
Well, and that's, you know, I was engaged when I lived in Philly, and it ended kind of rocky because it ended around the time my dad was diagnosed with cancer, and like, it just didn't, he cheated on me, and like, all, whatever, like, we won't even go there. Right. But I used to have all these recipes that I just made from memory. I never wrote them down. Right. I was embodying my Italian great grandmother, and I just didn't write them down. And I can't remember any of those things. They're gone. Like, I used to make the most amazing barbecue sauce and like all these, and they're gone. And now that I've started to do the healing, some of it is coming back, as well as some of that passion, right? But like you said, like, we need to go in, because our brain does its function. If we go back to primal caveman days, right? Like, our brain's function was to protect us. And that is, even though we've now developed all these wonderful things in our brains, and we've got all these parts and pieces that can do all these things, we still go back to lizard primal brain when we are activated when we are overwhelmed, elevated, any of those kinds of things, we go back to primal brain.
Yep.
So to get to that other parts of your brain and access your subconscious and access higher thinking, you have to calm those things that EFT tapping calms, then start to work through and pull those threads out.
Yeah.
Because I like to see it as like a tightly wound ball of yarn that's been locked in a little safe. And so once you can like break into the safe, you then just slowly start to pull those threads of yarn out and kind of untangle them.
Sometimes some are tied to others that you never saw the tangle before, and now it's like all about it.
I know. I kind of wish I had a wall in my house where I could literally like paint it with the whiteboard paint and start to map out my traumas and memories.
I thought about that too.
But I was like, I would need a pretty big wall, and that might get kind of messy.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I really want to beautiful mind this trauma all over my wall. That's the beauty of EFT and taking these trainings, is it has helped me kind of pull those threads out and figure out how interwebbed everything is.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, so then I need to work on this, this, and this, and then this will help resolve this issue.
Right.
And it's been so empowering. The confidence that's come through, the desire to learn again, the desire to be creative again, like all those things had been shut down as coping mechanisms in my losses and in my trauma, like all of that. I don't, listeners can't see, but you can see me right now. Like my office is half craft room.
I
used to be super creative, and that just got shut down as well with all my loss because it was just too hard.
Yeah.
And now that creative flow is starting to come back.
Yes.
And so when you can like unlock those pieces of yourself, it feels so good and
it's so liberating.
Relieving.
Yes, it is. It's like pressure, like you're bottled up and you've got this cap screwed on tight, and then when you open it, it's just like pew pew, like I'm out here, I love it. I know I've come so far too from my counseling, and that just commenting on the mind map thing, I was amazed when I went to see my counselor and I had told her, because they always say like, oh, what's your goal? Why are you here? Whatever. And I gave her my reasons. And by like the third session, she had told me like, look, you have PTSD. And I was like, what? And then she told me what my trigger was. And I'm telling you, Amanda, I almost fell out of my chair. I was shocked. I had never saw it coming at all. You know what I mean? It was just something that I was so used to coping with that I had masked it away as just a thing that happened in my life all the time, and I had to deal with it. And never once did I ever think it was the root cause of, it led to a 2-year journey sitting in her office. And it's amazing what it does when you can find that way to start unpacking. And it sounds like that EFT tapping is really a powerful tool for that. It's really something. Gosh, that's so amazing that you're in this spot that you are now. And really your happiness and your wholeness is just exuding through the screen. For those of you listening, we Zoom when we do these, so I can see Amanda, but I can just tell that you're happy and you're in such a good place and you've overcome so much in your life and all of that loss, like you're not that old of a person and you've experienced a lot of loss, and that's unique to you. And I think that overcoming and learning through and finding your place, knowing that you have a purpose, your true purpose is now apparent. You know what I mean? And it's a beautiful thing. Gosh, Amanda, tell us more about who you are now. What ways do you learn through life now that you're in this spot and you've blossomed? You're a beautiful flower.
Well, I have to kind of check myself on the learning, because I've learned I use learning as a procrastination tool. So I will sign up for all the classes, all the learnings. I will buy all the books, but I will use those as excuses to show up as a leader or show up as the counselor or show up, in those other roles, because I'll be like, oh no, I just need to learn one more thing. Oh no, I'm not ready yet. I need to learn one more thing. And so,
oh my God, I think I might be doing that.
Right. So I totally support being a lifelong learner. And I've learned that there's a balance so that you're not using learning as a procrastination tool. So, my goal is right now I'm in a couple masterminds and I'm doing my advanced EFT practitioner training. Yeah. And after that's all done, we're in the season of winter, right? So in the season of winter, it's a perfect season to be learning and growing and coming up through this, ready for this rebirth, right? When spring comes. End of April, beginning of May, my learning will shift and I will be taking on more of a role of the teacher. And
Yes.
that's part of why I'm doing all these podcasts. And I started a Facebook group and I'm trying to get myself out there more because I am now the person that wants to use all of my education and experience and skills and passions and almost everything I've lived through to help others. I want to get that message out there. I want to let people know that, you know, it's okay to talk about things like grief, loss, and death. It's okay to talk about emotional wellness and mental health. And if you're struggling, you know, our lives right now are putting us through trials and tribulations of unknown proportions like we've never seen before. Our nervous systems are being tried and tested every single day.
Yes.
While I would love to eventually work myself out of a job because everybody is healed or has the tools to do the healing and they're coping and we're in a world full of compassion and kindness and love. Right now, the reality is that, you know, leaders like us are needed that are out there spreading the messages and shining light in those areas of darkness for others to find. So that's who I am now, is I am learning to transition from learner being the main role to educator and leader being part of that role as well.
I love that. And you really can balance the two. You know, I'm a teacher and I've got this podcast now. And I feel like in many ways, people are learning from me all of the time. Now, I have so many people reach out to me and say, you are so down to earth. Thank you so much for doing this, because people can talk about the same topic, 10 different people, and they're going to say it 10 different ways. And you reach different people by who you are and the way that you explain things, or just your personality or your voice or whatever. And so you're right. It is important for us leaders to be out and sharing our knowledge and help to heal people and motivate people, inspire people. And I just love that that's what you're doing. But remember, you can have a balance, Amanda. You do not have to stop learning. If you love it, you keep doing it. I never stop learning. Never.
Well, I have a pretty tall stack of books that I'm waiting to. So that's where I'm going to transition. Good. I'm going to quit taking everybody else's courses. Yeah. Right. And signing up for and I'm going to start developing my own courses.
There you go.
And I'm going to finally read all those books that I've been stacking up.
I love it. Maybe you should write a book someday. I have my own children's book. So if you need help with publishing, you just let me know.
I kind of would like to do a memoir of sorts, like a personal essay kind of memoir collection. That's in the works. It's in the thought process. I also do poetry. I used to be a spoken word poet and would do performance poetry. And so as I've done more healing and that creative juice is coming back, some of that's coming up as well. And so I actually I'm tossing around the idea of getting back into my poetry some more. So,
I love that. That's so exciting. Yeah. You know what that reminds me of, though? You had mentioned how your creativity started to come back. So see, it's coming back in more than one way.
Yeah. And I'm really grateful for that. Because
that's amazing, Amanda.
It's been quite the dry spell.
Yeah. And it's going to feel so good getting that out. And you'll see that your healing has become sort of a source for that creative outlet, which is really cool, you know? Gosh, Amanda. So to anyone who's maybe struggling in any way, shape, or form similar to you, or maybe they just felt like connected to you in some way, what is the most valuable piece of advice that you would give them?
To learn that it's okay to not be okay, and to accept ourselves that we are right where we're supposed to be, right where we're at right now. And that if where you're at isn't working, it's okay to ask for help. Yeah. It's okay to seek support. It's okay to kind of be vulnerable and courageous, right? They go hand in hand, and put yourself out there and ask for that support.
Yeah. My counselor would always tell me that it's the strongest ones who actually go and get help, especially in an emotional front. I feel like the mental health and the inner strength, we just have this big wall built around that whole idea. And for some reason, and it's like, oh, you go get help. Oh, you know, I even had a close family member throw it in my face when I was going like, oh, well, you're the one who needs mental help. And I'm like, trust me, this person I'm talking about, he needs it more than anybody, let me tell you. But I was just like, whatever. If that's what you want to say, fine. But I know that I'm going on my path and I'm becoming the best version of me that I can become. Exactly. And I'm doing that work. And it's the hardest work you can do, but it's the biggest payoff that you can ever have.
Right. And to add to that, you know, my dad was gone at age 62. And so we never know what moment's going to be our last. While I advocate for balance, right? Like don't go too YOLO, right? Like too crazy, but do embrace that you do only get to live once. I think the best way to live our lives is to recognize that because we only get one life, why not strive in that life to be our best version of ourselves?
Yes.
And have that be our ripple in the pond.
Yes. Oh, I love that.
I believe it was Maya Angelou that said, like, people aren't going to remember what you said or what you did, but they're going to remember how you made them feel.
Yes.
And so my hope, my legacy is that I have made the world a better place from whatever ripple I've left in the pond for how I've made people feel.
I love that.
And hopefully
you'll never know how far that ripple travels either. That's the best part, I love that.
Yeah, but I had to start to get to that point. I had to start by asking for help and being vulnerable and saying that, like, hey, I'm not okay. And it's okay that I'm not okay, but how can I change this? And what can I do?
Oh my gosh, Amanda, amazing. Gosh, I just want to say thank you so much for sharing all of your story. I mean, seriously, it was so powerful, and you had me in tears a couple of times, and I just feel my whole body is there with you, and I'm just so happy that you're in the place that you are now. And honestly, I think we should talk more often because you're amazing. And I just think that it's a good thing. Us like-minded people need to kind of stick together. And I'm just really, really glad that you were able to come on my show and be here for my listeners and share your story with all of us. It's been really powerful.
Yes. Well, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Amanda.
Well, there you go, you guys. Another valuable conversation in the books. I had so much fun chatting with Amanda and hearing her story of loss and overcoming life's hardships and just generally having the undying drive to want to be better and get better. And now she's following her passion of helping others really reach their own potential, which I think is just awesome. Amanda, you're such an inspiration, and I'm just so appreciative of you. Your genuine personality shines through in everything that you do, and I'm just happy that I had the opportunity to have her on. As I let you go today, as always, I want to relay a heartfelt thank you through the sound waves from my soul to yours. I appreciate your time, your listening. Really hope that you enjoyed this episode. If you loved what you heard, please leave me a review and share this episode with someone that you feel may benefit. This podcast thrives on reviews and sharing between people, so if you feel like you've benefited, share it with someone who you think you might benefit as well. Head over to floatonpodcast.com to add us on social media and see updates. You can also find me on Instagram at floatonpodcast. I'm your host and producer, Dalia Jean. Until next time, float on.